It's a special treat today. We have special guests, colleagues of mine who I have a great deal of respect for. To my right, we have Governor Jerry Brown. We did a lot of work together, Governor Brown and I. We were both attorneys general together, so we go back and we have a long history. We have Governor Inslee, who I worked with during the Clinton administration, and Secretary John Kerry, who, when I worked with him, he was just a Senator John Kerry, but he was the ranking member of the banking department, and I was the HUD secretary, and HUD was under the banking department, so we did a lot of good work together, and those were good days when government worked. We also have First Lady Ann Gust Brown with us. Pleasure to have you. We have First Lady Trudy Inslee with us. Pleasure to have you. And we have Claire Hole, the Governor Brown's niece, is here.
She's right there.
Nice to see you. A New Yorker. Yes. We won't draw any implication from that Governor Brown's family chooses to live in the state of New York. I'm just coincidental. I want you to know, governors and first ladies, the traffic you see in New York City today, this is the only week of the year that we have traffic. If you come any other week, it's all because of the United Nations. The topic that we're here to talk about today is the environment and climate change. And in many ways, the issue of the environment is unique. Normally, you have political differences about how to solve a problem and different solutions to a problem. When it comes to the environment and climate change, we have a federal administration that denies the existence of the problem. And that is a fundamental difference. To me, it's an irrational refusal to recognize the issue. And to me, the federal government exists in their own state. I call it the state of denial. They've created their own 51st state on the issue of the environment and climate change. For the rest of us, we exist in the state of Massachusetts and California and Washington, so we don't have that luxury of just denying the reality of what we're dealing with. But it is the state of denial because they just are blind to facts and science and reality. It doesn't matter that 2016 was the hottest year on record, and 2015 before that, and 2014 before that. It doesn't matter that you have what the governor of Puerto Rico calls today the worst storm in the history of Puerto Rico, that we've had multiple Category 4 hurricanes come on land, more than ever before. None of that matters. 97% of the world's science climate experts agree that there's global warming, and they say that they're wrong. California, you had years of drought and then torrential rain and flooding. State of Washington, you've had wildfires. Yesterday, I spent the day on Long Island getting ready for possible Storm Jose, which would retrace the step, basically, of Hurricane Sandy. None of those facts seem to faze the federal government. In my opinion, this federal government is the most ignorant federal government we've ever had when it comes to the environment and climate change. So why the state of denial? Why the 51st state? Why would they do that? Well, there's a practical reason. If you deny a problem, then there's nothing to solve. And if there is nothing to solve, then nobody is inconvenienced. And that's their position. In the state of denial, you can drill in the Arctic. In the state of denial, you can build in floodplains, you can build in wetlands. None of it matters. Use whatever pesticides you want. What's the difference? DDT was very effective as a pesticide. Burn coal for power. There's no need for resiliency. There's no need for any change. It's like having a great party on the eve of destruction. For the other 50 states, we don't have the luxury of denial. And we understand what's going on, and we have to take very aggressive action, which we all are at this table. And I'm proud of what this alliance is doing, what we're doing with clean energy standards and emission standards, setting goals that would have been unbelievable just a few years ago. Everything we're rebuilding now with resilience. We assume there are going to be more storms, and we're taking that into consideration in our rebuilding. We're moving to renewables very aggressively. We're about to announce the largest wind-powered program off the coast of Long Island. But individual states can't solve this. Individual countries can't solve this. By definition, you need the collective. And that is why U.S. leadership on the Paris Accords was so important. And that's why the Paris Accords were such a tribute to the work of Secretary Kerry, because it was international, it was groundbreaking, and it was effective. What we're now trying to do, because the federal government in the state of denial is not following the Paris Accords, we're saying we will anyway. And we are the U.S. Climate Alliance. Our states are committed to following the Paris Accords. As a matter of fact, we're already ahead of where we should be on the reaching the Paris Accords, so we're doing very well. We have 15 states that are members of the alliance. A new state joins today, North Carolina, so we welcome them, and we're excited about that. And what I'm excited about is it's an alliance among states that are working with each other to help achieve the goals and find new ways to do it. Here in New York, we have something called the Green Bank that we started a few years ago. It's headed by Richard Kaufman. That has done very, very well. It's done about $1.4 billion in clean energy projects because it's hard often to finance clean energy projects because they don't fit the normal template. And that's where the Green Bank can step in. We're going to take that Green Bank and we're going to go national with it. So our Green Bank can work with all states on clean energy projects, and we're very excited about that. But the coalition and the alliances and the sharing of information and the sharing of technology, I think is a beautiful example to the denial of the federal government. And that's what this alliance is all about. I urge my other colleagues, the other governors in this country, to take a hard look at the facts and the science and put aside the politics. I understand the political pressure, but I also understand the facts. And at the end of the day, an obligation of a governor is to serve the people of the state, not the political bosses. And on this one, it's very simple. Either we end this problem, or this problem will end us. The terms are that stark. With that, let me turn it over to my colleague, Governor Jerry Brown from the great state of California.
Thank you. So, a great day to be here, joining with 15 states, including California and New York and Washington and the other states on the list. And we're doing something in the face of inaction, or as Governor Cuomo said, denial. We are on track to meet the Paris Accords, and this is America speaking. This is the U.S. Climate Alliance, and the number of states represent, in economic terms, the third largest entity in the world were we to be one nation state, which we, of course, are not. But together, in aggregate, we are a political and economic force, and we will drive the change that will get us to the climate goals that we have to reach. It takes rules enshrined in law, and it takes market and tax incentives to drive the investments in the innovation we need, whether it's the sophisticated grid that has to be built for intermittent renewable energy, whether it's zero-emission vehicles, whether it's the building standards and appliance standards we all need. That can, to a great degree, be driven by state law and state leadership. So that's what this is all about. Other countries ought to listen. The U.S. is in all the way to the Paris Accord, to the extent that these 15 states have joined the U.S. Climate Alliance. So we're all in. We're glad everybody else is, and we'll keep going. And we'll keep going, and eventually Washington will join with us, because you can't deny science forever. You can't deny reality. And reality is climate change is occurring. The heat-trapping gases are having an effect. And if we don't act in enough time, we will face catastrophic, irreversible changes in our world. And we're not going to do that. And today is a very important step in going in the right direction, which is the direction of dealing with climate change honestly, practically, and jointly with all others who are part of this coalition.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. We have Governor Inslee from the state of Washington. Thank you for being here, Governor.
Thank you. There's nothing better than being on a great team, and this is a great team. We got great governors. Governor Ige has been very helpful. He's had great results in Hawaii. By the way, I'm from Washington State, not Washington, D.C. D.C., that stands for Denial Coalition, or Deny Climate Change, one of the two. This is who we are. We are the Can-Do Coalition. We are the governors who believe we can defeat climate change. We are the governors who know that we grow our economies because we're defeating climate change. And while Donald Trump has told the world to count us out, our message is simple in New York City this week: you can count us in. And we're making progress that is unbelievable. We are at or ahead of the curve on where we need to be to meet our climate goals. And here's the message that I've been sharing in New York the last couple of days. We have exploded the myth that you can't defeat climate change and grow your economies at the same time. My state has a GDP growth that is about twice the national average. CNBC, and we're all in a close tie on this, but CNBC just listed my state as the best place to do business. This is a place where we have adopted all of the things you need to defeat climate change. We have first a cap on carbon dioxide. I believe that my people deserve a cap, a limit on the amount of pollution going on in their state. And they've got it by my executive order. We know we deserve ways to help companies develop capital so they can do great research. And today, the largest vanadium flow battery in the world today is manufactured in Mukilteo, Washington, in part because what our state has done to help them. Our consumers deserve incentives to be able to buy electric cars and solar panels, and we have that in the state of Washington. Now, we've shown in Exhibit A what happens when you do those things. You get one of the best economies in the entire world that's booming in the state of Washington. So it is not a coincidence that our economies are doing well. It is a consequence of what we're doing to develop clean energy technologies. Now, Donald Trump has run up really two white flags of surrender. He has run up the white flag of surrender against the threat of climate change, but he's also surrendered to the other economies in the world that are rushing to develop these new technologies and corner these markets. We want these markets right here in our states, and we're getting them, and we're getting great economic performance as a result. Second point I want to make is this. This is about controlling our own destiny, and we are controlling our own destiny. And there is nothing that Donald Trump can do to stop us in our states from advancing these policies. There is nothing he can do. He can't stop our caps. He can't stop our cap and trades. He can't stop our incentives. He can't stop our capital investment. We are controlling our own destiny. Because bottom line, the United States is much more than the sum of its tweets. And we believe strongly about that, and that's why we are moving forward. So I'm delighted to be part of this coalition. I look forward to more joining us. And I want to thank Secretary Kerry for your international leadership. We wanted to leave a message today and this week in New York, which is have confidence. And by the way, they are. It's kind of interesting. You know how many nations followed Donald Trump to the surrender ceremony? 0. And 15 states in Puerto Rico are moving forward to victory. So I look forward to more victory parties.
Great.
And now we'll hear from Secretary Kerry. Before we do, let me just say this, because I've known the Secretary for many, many years. Those of us in public service do it for one reason. There's not a lot of upside except one very powerful opportunity, which is to make this place a better place. And no one has done that better than Secretary Kerry. Both as senator and as secretary, he's made a difference all across this country. He made us proud in his global work, and the Paris Accords were really a beautiful, beautiful piece of work, and we'll get back to them. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Kerry.
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Well, Governor Cuomo, thank you. Thanks for very, very generous words. And what a privilege to be here with you today and with Jerry Brown, who I've known and worked with for years, and Jay Inslee likewise when he was in the Congress and in his state. I'm really grateful to have been invited here to join with these governors for a number of reasons. The stakes could not be more serious. It's very difficult to convey to people because of the draconian downsides when you start talking about loss of food, loss of water, climate refugees. The impacts of climate change across this planet are being felt everywhere. And a lot of people just kind of want to, cover themselves with the blankets and not get out of bed. It's hard to motivate people when you have stakes as high as they are involving the planet and its life and the life cycle of this planet. But what we are witnessing in the storms that we're seeing, which is not partisan. There's no D for Democrat or R for Republican after Harvey, nor Irma. But Harvey broke records. Harvey dropped more water in one storm in our country than in any time in recorded history. Irma had winds that were at a cyclonic level of 185 miles an hour for more than 24 hours. That's never happened before. And Governor Inslee out west has wildfires that are ravaging communities of his state. And we're seeing that in state after state. We're seeing droughts that last longer, floods that are supposed to happen every 500 years, happening more frequently. No one who is living this, really living it, doubts what is happening. And the importance of these governors coming together bipartisanly, this is a bipartisan alliance, is to say we're living on the front lines of this, and we are going to deliver for our nation and for the world. Now, this is also an enormous economic opportunity for our nation. The solution to climate change is not some pie-in-the-sky theory that we're waiting for some college or entrepreneur to find. It's here, now. We know what the solution to climate change is. It's energy policy. And so we have learned over these last years about these fantastic advances that have been made in the price of solar panels, in the price of solar energy, the price of wind turbine energy. Solar energy is growing today 17 times faster than the rest of our economy. The fastest growing job in America is wind turbine technician. And the fact is, solar panels today are competitive without subsidy with coal and fossil fuel. So the leadership being offered by these governors today, bipartisanly, is critical. We just had a 2-day conference at Yale University on this subject. And I'm so pleased that Governor Brown and Governor Inslee were there. They were part of this. But we also had former Secretary of State and Treasury Jim Baker Republican, served with George Herbert Walker Bush, Ronald Reagan. He was there to talk about the importance of pricing carbon. We had Jeff Immelt, the GE stepping down CEO of GE, one of our Fortune 500 companies, who said, we have to have our own foreign policy for a company. We have to remain committed to this direction. And we had former Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz, one of the country's foremost nuclear physicists and leaders, who's heading up the threat reduction initiative now from Sam Nunn. These are serious people. And every single one of them is committed to moving forward to deal with climate change. But importantly, yesterday, the bipartisan part of this message is something we have not been hearing in this country in recent days. Jim Baker said, we have to find compromise the way we used to. Most importantly, at the same session with Jim Baker, we had Senator John McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham come in by video from Washington, where they were stuck at the Senate, but both of them said, we have to move forward, we have to deal with this, and Lindsey Graham supported the notion that we are going to price carbon. Now, folks, $90 trillion is expected to be spent in the next 20, 30, 40 years on the new infrastructure of dealing with energy. This is the greatest economic opportunity our nation will have ever seen. All across the world, people are going to need to build out smart grids, new technologies, new energy, which is clean and which literally saves us from ourselves. I know that sounds weird, but 51% of the oxygen we breathe comes out of the oceans. And the oceans are being dramatically impacted by the increased acidification that comes from the CO2, the carbon dioxide that drops into the ocean. It's changing the life cycle of the oceans. And it is putting fisheries at risk, spawning grounds at risk, coral reefs at risk. Now, I don't want to run through all the risk pieces here, but let me just say this, Mr. President. Paris was not a real estate deal that transpired in a matter of days or weeks or even months. We worked at Paris for years. We went to China to deal with the Chinese because in Copenhagen everything failed because China was lined up with the G77 and we couldn't get forward progress. We made progress in China because the United States of America stood up with China and led. And we defined how we could make Paris a success. And in Paris, and I want to emphasize this, we did not come away knowing or somehow celebrating that we're going to hold the Earth's temperature to a 2 degrees centigrade rise, which is critical to avoid a tipping point here beyond which nothing the government does will make a difference. We sent a message. That's what Paris did. It sent a message to the global business community, to the marketplace, and said 196 nations are committed to moving in the same direction to deal with climate. And contrary to what President Trump, in misleading the American people when he pulled out, said, no burden was placed on the United States other than what we in the United States defined for ourselves as what we were willing to do and capable of doing. And the president didn't have to pull out. That was political. All he had to do was say, I want to change the targets a little bit. And he could have done that. But instead, he forfeited American leadership. He put at risk the momentum that has been created. And he said to the American people, I'm buying into the denial hoax that the governor of New York has just described. That's not leadership. That's a forfeiture of global responsibility and of American legacy on an issue of vital importance. So I am really pleased that we are here because the message that was sent out of Paris said 196 countries are going to live up to their obligations. It said that, and the result of that message is that for the first time in history of energy policy, more money was invested last year by twice as much than was invested in fossil fuels. More money was invested in alternative, renewable, and sustainable energy by twice as much for the first time in history. And we are seeing countries rapidly moving now to meet the goals of Paris. So we are going to meet it. And I think the message of this is, look, 38 states in the United States of America equaling 80% of the population of America, have already passed renewable portfolio standard laws. They're committed to move in the direction of Paris. So Donald Trump may have decided to move out of Paris. He may have decided to abdicate American leadership. But thank God there are governors and mayors all across this country who, together with the 80% of the American people who are represented in those 38 states, they're not going to forfeit leadership. We are going to meet what we need to do by Paris, and I believe the United States of America is going to exceed it. And more power to these governors for their leadership. Thank you.
We have any questions on this topic?
Governor, we're certainly a very divided nation right now. I think it's certainly fair to say that you talked about some of these ideological divides. When certain states go it alone and are not united as a nation, are you concerned that in any way that aggravates those divisions?
You know, Zach, I don't know. First of all, on this topic, I don't know that there is the division among the American people that you see reflected in Washington. As Secretary Kerry said, they get it. They get it. You turn on the TV, you see these storms all over the country, one worse than the other, record rainfalls, record hurricanes. You get it. You live in this country. You get that 2016 was the hottest year, and 15 before that, and 14 before that. So they get it. I think it's Washington that is in denial. And I think they're in their little Washington bubble. And I understand it and I get it, but I don't think they're reflective of the American people at all. And I think the majority of the American people are with us in recognizing the problem and in recognizing the opportunity. You know, this is not just the peril of what happens if we do nothing and we continue the degradation of the environment. This is also the promise of economic opportunity if you actually realize it. This is where the economy is going. This Washington philosophy of we're going back to the good old days with the economy, and that's how we're going to make America great again. You don't get great going backwards, right? You get great going forwards. You can't go back to the manufacturing era in this country. Those days are over. That chapter is closed. And by the way, what great old days? The 50s and the 60s, when we were polluting the environment, rivers in Ohio were on fire, you know. It's about going forward. And this is the economic opportunity going forward. The world gets it, the planet gets it. This is where we should be moving. One of our toughest economies in this state is the city of Buffalo, an old steel manufacturing city, and never got enough assistance on the transition. Buffalo's exciting new economic engine, they are the largest manufacturer of solar panels in the hemisphere with the Tesla company. That's the kind of economic opportunity that you now have. What do you do with all those Rust Belt cities that lost their place after the manufacturing economy? Step into the new clean energy economy. And there's a great opportunity there. So no, they have to get with it, Zach. It's not a political difference. I think they are purposefully denying the reality because they don't want to deal with solving the problem.
Governor, Lisa Friedman.
You can't just say governor today. You need more specificity than that.
Yes, a question for any of the governors and one for Secretary Kerry. In addition to the climate targets in the Paris Agreement that the states are taking on, the Paris Agreement promised money to help poor countries, developing countries deal with climate change. The president has, rescinded a promise of $10 billion over 4 years to help countries. Is that something that states are willing to help on and work on? Is there a role for states in helping other countries? And for Secretary Kerry, if you don't mind, mixed messages that we're hearing about whether the U.S. will or won't eventually come back into the Paris Agreement. One thing floating out there again is the possibility of redoing its targets, which I guess it could have done months ago. But if the U.S. ultimately comes back in or asks to come back in with a empty emissions target, is it a Pyrrhic victory? Is it still worth having the U.S. come back in if they've got a proposal for an emissions target that is minor at best?
You want to go first, Mr. Secretary?
Well, that's a great question. And I just came from a meeting with Mayor Bloomberg, Jim Kim of the World Bank, President of Austria, CEOs of various companies, because we are engaged in putting together a finance alliance as well as this kind of an alliance. And the theory is, people don't realize it, there's about somewhere between 10 and 13 trillion dollars around the world sitting in net negative interest status. In other words, people are paying banks for the privilege of putting their money in them. They're not earning interest. And we believe, and I gave a speech at Harvard Kennedy School this year laying out a 21st century Marshall Plan, which is not dependent on the government putting money in, because that obviously is proving difficult in the gridlock politics of today, but attracting the private sector to the table with the trillions of dollars that could be invested on infrastructure. And if the World Bank steps up, and this is where Jim Kim is critical, and he said he would, they will help de-risk these investments. They will help provide first money loss. They will take it. They will provide political risk insurance. And if we create leadership at the international level, we can bring key players together to de-risk certain countries by making sure they have adequate transparency and accountability in their system, by making sure the offtake for companies is going to be a power agreement which is sustainable and enforceable. These are the key things staring us in the face in this new paradigm. And the leadership of governors and the leadership of corporations coming together is what is going to really save us here, I think. And these two storms, Irma and Harvey, are going to cost probably more than $200 billion. And let me make this, if I can, just a little add-on. No one here is saying, and nor can any of us legitimately scientifically say, that any one storm is a result of climate change. That's not what we're saying. But what we do know is that the intensity of those storms is impacted by climate change. And we're seeing greater intensity, which is what scientists have predicted for 10 or 15 years we're going to see. So when you have greater wind level, that's climate change. When you have more rainfall, that's the climate change, because the water is warmer, more moisture, and that increases the intensity of a storm. So we know that we're looking at these impacts that are actually costing us more than it would to get ahead of it with adaptation, mitigation, and prevention measures. So that's the common sense that we're trying to break into the policy making on an international level. That's what we talked about at Yale the other day. And Leonardo DiCaprio came, who better to talk about the effect of glacier, breaking off and icebergs. He was talking, he made a very important contribution, because he talked about his own journey to activism here and really inspired, I think, in a lot of young people a sense that they're going to have to be part of our politics going forward to change things. The way, frankly, we saw things change on the environment in the 1970s, and civil rights in the 1960s, because people created accountability in the political system. And that's what we have to get back to. So if the president were to change the target, it would be the wrong decision, because this target has been arrived at with all of the input of biggest companies in America that went to Paris. The Fortune 500 companies, the Chamber of Commerce, supported Paris. So there's no reason in the world to change them. But if he changed them, he's going to be in for a surprise, these governors and individual corporations around the country are going to beat the Paris targets. And they're not going to stop because Donald Trump weakens the target. They're going to continue because they want credibility in the world, because they want to sell their products, and because this is going to be the largest market the world has ever seen. We have a 4 to 5 billion person market today. It's going to go up to 9 billion people by 2050 or so. And every single one of those companies knows that those people are going to want clean water, they're going to buy water, they're going to buy good transportation, they're going to buy the energy necessary to provide the electricity for their electric car or their home. That's the biggest market in the future. And that's why the money is going to move in that direction, notwithstanding Donald Trump. Maybe his inability to understand that explains why he has filed for bankruptcy multiple times. I don't know. But I can tell you this. The marketplace is not going to wait for the president. It's going to make its own decisions. And these governors understand that. And that's why we're going to move in this direction no matter what they do.
Jerry, Jay, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we're not backing up 1 centimeter from Paris. As Humphrey Bogart said, we'll always have Paris. And we are committed to that. And I'll tell you why we're committed to it. We're committed to it because why would we give economic growth to China or India or Germany? We want to seize these economic opportunities. This is in America and Washington and California and New York's wheelhouse. This is what we do. We innovate. This is what we do. This is made for our states. It's made for our country to innovate. So we look at this as a growth opportunity. And by the way, lest people think this is just kind of a bunch of yahoo governors who got together and ginned up a press conference, we represent 40% of the United States economy. The states that are now in the United States Climate Alliance represent fully 40% of the entire economic opportunity in the United States. If we were a country, and we're not suggesting that, because that would be a constitutional problem at the moment, but if we were a country, we would be the 3rd largest economy of any nation in the world. So this is a significant achievement. Yes, Donald Trump's surrender that he had about Paris is a news story, but I think this is a news story too, that the 3rd largest country in the world that just doesn't have its own flag, we share our own, we're in this game. So I want to point this out. This is an economic story.
Last question, guys.
Governor Brown.
Wait, let me just, in 20 seconds, answer the 3 questions. 1, finances. Kerry talked about that from the private sector, World Bank. Also through a cap-and-trade system that California and Quebec are already a part of, Ontario to join later this week, through the purchase of allowances, billions of dollars of private money could go in part to supporting 3rd world countries to the extent they can reduce their greenhouse gases. Finally, the empty commitment, it's better to have Trump at null hypothesis. It's cleaner and clearer, and will bring the day closer when we overcome that. We don't want some phony minimal goal. And number 3, division among states. Yeah, they're divided, but the key to these states is the Republican Party, and the key to the Republican Party is business. And business, with our help and on their own, are coming around slowly to a strong climate agenda. And when that happens, you'll see the Republicans change, and with them, those Republican states.
Let me add one other quick point if I can. There's no reason to go backwards because we've proven that we can meet these goals, and as a matter of fact, our progress is even ahead of schedule. So you have 15 states, 36% of the nation's population that is already ahead of the goals. Why would you ever need to roll them back?
You and Governor Cuomo to each lead the largest carbon markets in the Americas. Would the 2 of you support linking those 2 markets as a way of showing the rest of the world that states are committed to solving this problem?
Yes.
Governor Cuomo?
I think it's a very interesting idea. You know, the devil's in the details, but I'd be very interested in it.
And Governor Brown, do you want to elaborate on why yes?
Why, yes?
Because he controls his legislature. That's why.
Well, we do have a 2/3 vote. That helps, but we got it through 8 Republican votes, which are an indication of the movement within that party, however small. I'll tell you, this cap and trade system is working to reduce greenhouse gases and is generating billions of dollars of private investment, purchasing the allowances that then can be deployed to help people purchase zero-emission vehicles, to help dairy companies invest in biodigesters, and on and on. This is a source of funding for climate actions in the private sector. It makes sense. It requires a very disciplined and controlled system, but I would very much welcome the state of New York into our cap and trade system.
Good. Effective.